Welcome to the Bodybuilding Banter podcast, your number one source of all things bodybuilding. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. Now, here's your host, Leroy Rollins.
All right, people, welcome to the Bodybuilding Banter podcast. I am here with my man, Josh Kenyon, making, I believe, round 3 on the podcast now. We're 3,
Sir.
The trifecta, right on. All right, dude, introduce yourself to the people that might not know who you are, and then we'll dive right on in.
What's up, y'all? I'm Josh Kenyon. I'm 21 years old. I'm just a college student, and I guess you could say I'm a natural bodybuilder. I've only done one show. I competed in 2018 at the California Natural Muscle Mayhem, so that was my first ever prep. Worked with Team 3DMJ, and so as of yet, I have yet to do another show. Just been training for about 7 years now, completely drug free, regardless of what some people like to say. But
And let's address that right now. So myself and Josh, getting ready for this podcast, we had both posted on our Instagram the whole Ask Me a Question. People submitted a bunch of questions. We probably got around 10,000 questions, I think, submitted for this podcast. And a few people came to me commenting, saying that there's no way Josh is natural and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, my biggest gripe with that is, A, none of these people know you personally, which is ridiculous to make that claim at all. The other thing is, like, who you're working with. You mentioned you're working with Team 3DMJ, which if anybody, especially in the natural bodybuilding realm, doesn't know who they are, go figure it out, because they're probably, I don't know, in my opinion, they're one of the best teams out there. The caliber of athletes that they are themselves and the caliber of athletes that they produce on stage is second to none. So I don't think they'd put their name on the line, for example, coaching someone claiming that they're drug-free when they're not. Josh also competes in the WNBF, which is, in my opinion, the top natural federation for bodybuilding. I don't know what it was like when you competed, but when I went to the States and competed, every athlete was polygraph tested. I assume it was the same for you?
yeah, and actually they would do random testing to like some of the natural pros. So I know like Sam Okanola, I believe, or Jeff Snippert, or one of them, I think, actually got randomly chosen to get tested. So I think that's one thing that's pretty cool that they do.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of drawbacks if someone's enhanced to compete. I know some federations, for example, here in Canada, the drug testing is laughable, to say the least. So, you know, a lot of people can sneak through the cracks, whereas with the WNBF, it's pretty legit. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because you got a lot of people that, you know, bitch and moan for no reason. So just want to address that. I'm fully in support of this guy. So anyways, let's move on, my man. So like I said, we got a bunch of questions. We're going to just rip through them. A lot of them are regarding Josh's training, his mentality with training, his style, his split, all these things. So I've got them all up here on my phone, so we're just going to scroll through. My man, you ready?
Sounds good.
Cool. So first one I got, techniques you use when training to get your back so dense.
Okay, so back training.
Yeah, back training as a whole. Let's generalize it a little bit.
So yeah, with back training, I mean, I feel like there's just a lot of parts of your back. So obviously, there's a lot of different ways you need to hit it. And I think a huge thing is with my back. Everyone has their strong points to their physique, and usually those strong points, those muscle groups have developed perhaps quicker than the other muscle groups.
Yep.
And as a result of that, also, I feel like they're able to gain that thigh-muscle connection with that muscle group maybe sooner than others. And because of that, they just have a really good connection with that muscle group. So for me, with my back, I've been able just to have, just even at an early age, like at 16, like I already had I got a crazy muscle connection with my back. And so really any kind of movement I do for my back, I can really just get good stimulation out of. But
sure.
I think one thing is, with your back, that's where you really have to have that bodybuilder mentality when you train. So thinking about the muscle group you're hitting, with each exercise you're doing, whether that's a bent over row, whether that's the pull-ups, single arm dumbbell row, whatever back exercise you do, you have to think about, okay, I'm trying to actually grow with my back. I'm not just trying to use my arms. Like, where the elbow,
Yep.
You should lead with your elbows. My hands, like, for me, I've got to the point where I don't have to really consciously think about, what I'm doing when I'm hitting my back. But I think, it's just thinking about that muscle group you're hitting when you train it. And so with me, obviously I like to do rows. I started out just training at my house where I only had free weights.
Yep.
So I would do bent over barbell rows, like T-bar rows with the bar in the corner, like that.
Wedge the barbell. Yep.
Yeah, and of course free weight pull-ups. Did a ton of pull-ups, weighted pull-ups. I used to always do those. But yeah, so I think I've started out with a lot of free weight movements, which has resulted in, I think, also just having those erectors. Doing a lot of free weight movements. Of course, deadlifts too, added to the erector musculature I have. But I think a lot of times, the ego, you really kind of do have to take the ego out of the equation when you're training your back, for the most part at least. Because ultimately, if you're not getting really good contractions, you're just not going to build a good back, in my opinion. So that's really how I started. I always was, whether I'm doing pull-ups or bent over rows or whatever, really initially a lot of it was just making sure I was really feeling those muscles work. And yeah, like thinking about, obviously, when I train my back now, it's like my hands are like hooks. So I always do a thumbless grip.
Yeah, I agree with that one there.
Bent over barbell rows.
Yep.
I use straps, but I still do a thumbless grip. Even if I'm doing weighted pull-ups or whatever, it's always a thumbless grip.
Yep.
The only time I will have like my thumb wrapped around is if I'm doing single arm dumbbell rows.
Yeah.
But other than that, I do a thumbless grip. So I'm focusing completely on that back and the elbow positioning, where the elbows end and the movement is so important. And yeah, it's really like any other muscle group. You got to think about what you're doing. And for some muscle groups, for me, like when I'm squatting, or maybe if I'm just doing like a regular, conventional deadlift or a bench press, you might not be necessarily thinking so much about just having that connection.
Yeah.
You're thinking more about other things. Like I'm trying to make sure I'm braced properly when I'm squatting and these other things like that. But for movements like the back movements and isolation movements, obviously you're really trying to, at least for me, I'm really trying to focus on what muscle group I'm hitting and thinking about it like that. So the mind muscle connection is a real thing.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to, over this past year, I've tried to really gain a better connection, like with my side delts.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about where, I'm leading with the elbows on, lateral raises. I'm thinking about actually pulling the weight with, the lateral head of the delts.
Yep.
Or with the rear delts. That's another muscle group I've tried to, over this past year or two, I've tried to really gain a better connection with. And a lot of that is, at least initially, I think you have to really drop the ego initially. So, especially when you're first starting out and you don't have a good connection, like with your back especially, you really need to drop the ego and just really focus on perfecting that technique and getting those really good contractions, getting a good range of motion. And over time, once you put on some more muscle in your lats, and get more thickness and you gain a better connection, you can kind of even maybe think more about, moving more weight. And for me, for instance, when I do my bent over rows, sometimes on the later sets, I will go heavier and my form's not, perfect. But I kind of use that as a movement where I focus more on load and more on just trying to lift as much as I can. And again, some of those clips you'll see of me are not the first two sets or whatever. They're the last sets where I'm going the heaviest I can do.
Yep.
I can go. So my form gets looser. So for instance, the other day, I was working with 275. Obviously, it was much more controlled than 365.
Yeah.
So I'll do some initial sets that are cleaner and everything, and then I might go a bit heavier. But again, this is me at this point, in my back training where I have a really good connection. Initially, before I had that connection, I was never just trying to, row a ton of weight. That was never a thing. And again, with the other movements I'm doing, like, for instance, I always like to do, like, a free weight row. So, like, on my heavier day of rowing or my heavier pool day, I'll do, like, bent over barbell rows. And then on the other day when I go a bit higher reps, I'll do, like, single arm dumbbell rows. Right. So I always like to keep a free weight moving in that's, loading the lower back and everything. And it's, perhaps a little more challenging, but I love free weights because I always started out, using the free weights. I feel like, again, not only am I, I'm still hitting the lats, I'm hitting the rhomboids, hitting all of that, but I'm also really loading the erectors, which I think is important. I think if you want to have that crazy Christmas tree, you gotta load the lower back some. And so I'll do like another row that's a lot more controlled, a chest supported row, so like a chest supported T-bar row. Yeah. Or there's a newer machine at this gym I've been going to. They have a chest supported row machine I've been using recently, and for that row, I usually like to do. So I'll stick with one row will be a lower row, more for the lats, like I'm rowing to my belly button area, my lower abs. Yep. And then the other row will be a higher row, more to my lower pec area, more for the rhomboids, the mid traps, the root delts. So again, I'm trying to hit everything there, and of course, with the chest supported row, again, I try to take the ego out for the most part and really make sure I'm getting good tractions on that. And again, with ego, I mean that I'm just.
Oh no.
Just like heavy to like have like progress or reserve or something like you can still push, but you're still controlling the load. And then of course low pull ups. Usually always keep pull ups in each pull day. I'll do some pull downs too with the different grips. So I usually do back movements each pull day. And like it's kind of like two variations, two different variations of like a horizontal row. So that's kind of mostly how I hit my back. Cool. And then, like I said, I have two different pull days, so like the rep ranges are different. So I'm getting a variation of rep ranges, and I'm hitting my back from different angles. And yeah, the biggest thing is just you got to find movements that work for you. So like for me, since I have such a good connection, I can really do pretty much any kind of back exercise and feel it. Although, I mean, I will say that, like, I was trying out a row machine, like, yesterday, and it felt okay, but honestly, I was just thinking to myself afterwards, because I was with a friend lifting, so he wanted to do it, so we tried it out, but I was just thinking to myself, like, man, I feel it so much better with dumbbell rows, Yeah. Dumbbell rows, I just get a better connection, so you got to find the movements that allow you to get that really good connection. Totally. So don't look at me just because I'm doing bent over rows and think, oh, I need to do those. Especially if you're new, you probably should stay away from them and maybe just stick with movements that you can control better first. Because really, keep in mind, or I guess I just let people know that since I was lifting at my house, I really had no choice but to use free weights. So like for instance, bent over barbell rows, I just did those because there weren't many other movements I could do. Sure. But if you're at a gym, you're kind of newer. That doesn't mean you have to do them. You could stick with more machines to start out with, perhaps, and then transition into like adding in some free weight movements. But again, I think it's just finding exercises that really allow you to get that good connection, and then just progressing in them over time.
Yeah, I agree with you exactly. Like everybody's gonna have exercises that they feel more than others, and like you said, just because you're doing exercise A, B, and C doesn't necessarily mean everybody does, right? Like you'll look at 5 top pros, and there may be some similarities, but there also may be many differences, right? So it's not to necessarily say either is right or wrong. It's just they've found what works for them, and that's exactly your case, right? You found what works for you, and multiply that over the course of 7 years. There you go.
Right. Exactly.
For sure. All right, man. Next one. What are your calories at right now?
The infamous question.
Yeah. Bro, how much you eat?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just like, I guess one thing I want to say is like, I just don't understand what's with these people's fascination of like someone else's like macros or someone else's intake.
Yeah.
It's not really applicable to them. Like, I don't Doug Miller is like the greatest natural bodybuilder, but I don't need to know, his macro breakdown for the day. I don't need to know how many carbs he takes in or how many calories he takes in, because that's not gonna, be what I need. So like, I just don't understand people's fascination with that. But I guess I will say, I'm taking in anywhere from 2,700 to 3,500 calories right now for what I'm doing.
Cool, easy. I agree. Just I'll add to his statement. Don't ever concern yourself with someone else's food, because it has zero effect on you. Just whatever Josh eats, like, I'm not gonna go eat that tomorrow. That's not gonna do me any good. So just figure out your own plan and stick with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it goes back to the exercise selection too. You got to find what works for you, and I think too many people get caught up in what this person is doing or that person is doing, even if they're like a top pro or someone. You can take a lot from that person, but you need to think about what is going to work best for you, and you got to just individualize everything to your own needs.
For sure. All right, man. Next one. I'm trying to find a good one. What's your split right now?
Okay, well, legs push-pull has been like the split up for so long. After my show in 2018, well, I was actually doing a 5-day routine, so it was kind of a hybrid of like an upper-lower legs push-pull split. And so I was doing a 5-day routine at that time, but previously, before I was working with him, I was doing legs push-pull, and then afterwards, I went back to legs push-pull, and since then, I still legs push-pull. So I always start out with legs. I know most people do push-pull legs, but I like starting off the week with legs. So I do legs push-pull off, and then repeat. So I'm training 6 days in a row right now.
Good times.
And it's just what I like to do. It's just my preference. I'm still trying everything.
Man,
upper lower before, and I just don't really. I liked upper lower, but like I was doing upper lower, and I was only training 4 days a week, and like I'd rather train more than that. And I just think for the amount of volume I need to do, also, like I feel like just having upper body all in one day, I'm just not able to do enough.
Yep.
Unless I do like a super long workout. For me, at least, I feel like I'm just not, getting able to get enough volume. I would like I've done that before, and I was doing like when I was prepping with Jeff, like maybe it's just a mental thing, but it just felt like I wasn't doing enough, like for my chest or for my back. Like I'm only doing 2 back exercises or whatever,
Yeah.
Maybe it's a mental thing, but it's just what I like to do. So, and I'm progressed in it, so that's why I do it.
Cool. Right on. How do you know the appropriate amount of volume for each muscle group that you need to do?
You start training, It's one of those things where you have to it's just trial and error, in my opinion, at least. You have to, start training with a set amount of volume, have a set split, have a structured, relatively structured routine, and see if you're recovering or not.
Yep.
If there's certain muscle groups that aren't recovering before you train them again, you might need to make some adjustments. And so it's really, a lot of it's just trial and error, and that's really bodybuilding. don't get too caught up in what I'm doing necessarily or how much volume I'm doing. Find out what's going to work the best for you. And as long as you're recovering, that's the key. If you're not recovering enough, then yeah, you might need to drop the volume back down some, or maybe the intensity or something. But it's just one of those things you have to just kind of go into and make adjustments as needed. I think, at least.
Yeah, volume is very individual to the person, right? And like it's different per muscle group, even like.
Yep.
Like lateral delt, for example, like you could probably smash them every other day and you'd be fine. But if you wreck your quads and 4 or 5 days later you're still not recovered, you might have went a little too hard, right? So it's customized, right? It's just like your diet, right? It's all specific to the person, specific to their recovery capabilities, and there's external factors too, right? Like you had mentioned, with school and stuff right now, like you're doing a lot more than you did before. So like that, will impact recovery, even if it's just like walking more, right? But you take someone who works construction and someone who sits at a desk, like those recovery capabilities are vastly different.
Definitely. Yeah, like those bigger muscle groups are probably going to not be able, you probably won't be able to train them as frequently. Some of those smaller groups like your biceps, triceps, side delts, rear delts, you could probably train them more frequently than your quads or your chest, I would say.
For sure. All right, man. Next one. How do you order your exercises? Do you have a specific kind of mentality in that, or what made you decide how to place what where?
I guess usually I'll do the quote-unquote hardest movements first. I still usually do it that way. So, like, if I'm, like, for my legs, well, I usually, like, will start up with, like, squats, for instance, and then maybe Romanian deadlifts, and then, like, hack squats or something, I'll get those out of the way. Yeah. Then I'll go into, like, leg extensions, isolation movements, and whatnot. Or, like, with, chest or whatever, doing the bench press or whatever, incline barbell, I'll do that stuff first before I get into like lateral raises and chest flies and whatnot. So I usually do those basic compound movements first, and then I'll go into the isolation movements later. Yep. That's just how I've always done it. Just how I prefer to do it.
How much do you throw in like drop sets, supersets, giant sets? Like are they pretty, random in your routine, or is it once a workout you might throw something like that in, or is it straight sets always?
Well, over this past year I've actually incorporated more drop sets with some exercises, like with maybe, usually with more isolation movements.
Yeah.
So like I started doing drop sets on lateral raises, and I love doing those. Yeah. And like with chest flies, movements like that, or even lat pull downs too, or sometimes the chest board T-bar rows. I'll take a plate off and do more like that. Big drop sets. So cool. I've really started incorporating them, and I don't know, there's something about doing those drop sets where it feels like during the drops you just feel like almost a better connection with the muscle group. I feel like as it goes on, like with the lateral, raises, for instance. Like I might do like a triple drop set or even something like that, and like
run the rack.
You just get a lot of blood into the muscle, but like you just start to like usually how I do it is for like I have certain movements that I'll do the drop sets on, certain movements that I won't. So it's it's kind of structured in there. So like for instance, like the lateral raises, usually I'll do drop sets there, and usually so like when I deload and come back that first week, I probably won't do drop sets. But the later weeks, I'll start, adding them back in, and it'll be certain movements, like I said. So I have that structured, and basically with the drop sets, I'll have my initial working sets where obviously I'm trying to beat the logbook. I'm trying to beat my previous numbers, or at least match what I've done before. And so that's kind of always in my head on those sets. I'm thinking about, okay, I hit this number or whatever, I hit with this weight, but with the drop set, I'm not really trying to like write down in my logbook, how many reps I did on the drops. I'm thinking all about, getting that connection. So that's something I think that may be actually helping me get a better connection, like with my side delts and my rear delts. Some of those muscle groups that sometimes, you see a lot of people just training them wrong.
Yeah.
And so like like on the drops on the side down on the lateral raises and stuff. Like all I'm thinking about during those moments is just how it feels, getting that good connection. I'm not trying to beat any certain I guess past
numbers,
workouts or anything there. I'm just trying to really focus on that connection, or like with the lat pull downs too. I like doing them on there too, but yeah, that's kind of how I've been incorporating them for just certain movements, and not obviously not with like a squat, and I haven't been doing that with Romanian deadlifts or anything like that.
Not doing deadlift drop sets here.
Well, I mean, I've done that.
Get a guy to pull a plate off each side.
Yeah. If I had a training partner maybe, but yeah, usually it's kind of, I guess you could say, safer movements.
Yeah.
But yeah, again with the drops, I'm focused more on just getting that really good connection, because I think sometimes too, even when you obviously we know that progressive overload is important, and I personally think it's important to kind of at least keep track of your workouts, whether or not you're necessarily writing them in a book. I do write them in a book, but whether or not you do that, as long as you're you are actually keeping track of your progression in each of your lifts, each of your exercises, I think that's really important. But sometimes there's downsides to that, because I've noticed with myself, obviously there's times where you just try to beat that number and your form gets a little looser as a result, or you just try to add load when you really should have held off and waited, until the next week, or whenever you felt better to actually push, because sometimes it's like you get too caught up in just the numbers, and it's like your execution might actually get worse, and so it's like, obviously as a bodybuilder, that's not a good thing. So just because you're doing more reps doesn't necessarily mean you're really actually getting a better stimulus, or even really overloading, because if I'm just doing a half reps and counting that as oh yeah, I did more reps on the squats than I did the other week, then it's like, that's not really overload, So I think sometimes it's been good for me, because I can get back to making sure I'm also thinking about the execution of the movement. Cool. So
yeah, man, for sure, I agree 100%. Some of these questions are just ridiculous. How do I know you're not? How do I know you're natural?
Oh yeah, I saw that one, and it's that thing where it's like, how do I know the moon is 200,000 miles away? It's like, I trust the scientists, I trust those people. There's no reason for me to think they're lying, and it's kind of like with that, we can't know. I can't know anyone's really naturally. I can't know you're not. You know what I mean? You can't technically just know anyone else is natural.
My biggest thing is say someone did lie, right? Someone come out and they're like, yeah, I was lying. Then what? What does that do?
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. When people say that about me, it's like, I don't get it. I don't sell anything. I'm not even a trainer. There's not really any incentive for me to even be a fake nanny. I guess I was a fake nanny when I was 16, because if you look at those pictures, I had a decent lat spread, but of course people will argue that I was on drugs at that young of an age. So it's one of those things where you can't really win.
You can't win, no.
But yeah, obviously I don't think that person was trying to call me out, really. I think they were just saying that. But yeah, it's one of those things you can't ever really know if someone's natural. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to think about your own. Just think about your own goals and focus on just that self-improvement, because if I get too caught up in this person or that person, it's that's not really benefiting me. And even when I was starting out and I started following people on YouTube, sometimes I would follow people that would just call people out and say, oh, this guy's a fake natty, and this guy, and sometimes that would mess up my head, and I actually started to think it's those people. So a lot of people are calling me out now, but a lot of times I used to be those people, and I used to see people and just
No. Damn internet. We back.
We back. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Problems of you're in California, right?
Oh no. I was there in 2018, but I'm on the East Coast.
Oh, you're all over the place then.
Georgia.
Anyway,
I'm in Georgia.
We're connecting each other across the world here, so the internet's giving us some trouble, but that's fine. That's fine.
Here we are.
We'll return back to our scheduled programming.
So we were on the Natty Talk or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
so
yeah, I was like that at one point where I was thinking a lot of people that I believe now are natural. You know, I was actually kind of like I was thinking maybe they were not natty, and like, you know, it's really just kind of a waste of time to really focus so much on that. And I think a lot of it comes back to like just the mindset you have whenever you think that, like, whenever you're so focused on this person and you're trying to like even rather just assume someone's natural, like, you can find out they're not. It's like, okay, what's the harm? Like, if they motivate me to push myself more or like see something more in myself,
yeah,
then I think that's like a big thing. And so like even now, like I had like the other day I posted on my story just a picture of like Phil Heath as like motivation, and this guy's like, you know, like he's unnatural, right, or something like.
You're like, what?
Like, I actually had the assumption that I could get like that or something. Like, no, I can still use that as motivation. Even if I know I'm never going to get to that level, like, basketball players still look up, which, you know, rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. Yeah, but look up to him or LeBron or, like, some of the greats, knowing they might not ever be on that level.
Yeah.
Like, or Usain Bolt, like, there's runners who I guarantee they never are going to be able to run that fast, but they still might look up to him as motivation, you know? Yep. So it's things like that. And even with natural bodybuilding, once you really dive into it and kind of get immersed into it, you see that, like, genetics play a big role in bodybuilding. And 100%. So there's certain guys that you see, maybe like Doug Miller or Sam Okinola or some of these guys like that, or Garino Mackie, another beast. His name was like Iron Lord on Instagram, but some of these crazy natural physiques, and you know, like, I might not ever have this guy's arms or his legs or have that V taper or whatever that he has, but like, I think that there's something to be said about using that as like motivation and realizing that, like, you know, this guy, you know, he didn't put limits on what he could achieve based on what some other people said was possible. And I think ultimately, if you have an open mind, you know, with that, you'll just go farther, no doubt. You might not get, you know, the same physique this guy has, but I think ultimately, you know, this should all be about self-improvement anyways. Yeah. You know, most of us are not doing this for the external reasons anymore. Most of us, you know, at this point in our training career, it's, you know, intrinsic motivation.
100%, man. I agree with you. That's good. Next one. What's your favorite exercise for each muscle group?
For each muscle group?
Like,
let's see.
The basics.
Okay, let's break it down. For chest, I would say chest, it was probably just like incline barbell.
Cool.
Incline barbell for chest. Let's see, for back, I mean, it's either pull-ups or probably bent over rows. So one of those. For legs, I mean, I've always done squats.
Yep.
So I would say probably squats, and actually recently over this past year, I started doing like the legit hack squats, because before then I never, you know, had access to a real hack squat machine.
Yeah.
And I love those now. I love
wish
doing
my gym
just
had
close
one.
stance, as deep as I can go.
Yeah.
Hack squat. So like those have been killing my quads, and I think that's really helped bring my quads up over this past year. So. Sure. I would say that for legs. For hamstrings, probably Romanian deadlifts right now.
Yep.
I've been really getting into them, enjoying them. Let's see, for biceps, dang. That's kind of hard.
Curls.
I don't know. Curl, you know, some kind of curl. Obviously, I always like to do a hammer curl. Like, I do hammer curls more for the, you know, for the brachialis, brachioradialis. And I think that makes a difference. A lot of times I feel like people neglect, you know, really focusing on the brachialis, and that's what gives you that 3D look whenever you get really lean.
Yeah.
I feel like with arms, you like Phil Heath has a crazy breakouts.
Yeah,
You know,
this
like
is nuts.
it just makes once you get leaner, you get that separation in your arms. It makes them look bigger. Like my arms, I feel like they suck, but when I get leaner, they get that separation, and you can kind of see that it kind of makes them look bigger than they are. But
Yep.
so I always like to keep them in, and like with triceps, I used to always do close grip incline for like that was my main compound movement for a long time for triceps. This close grip incline, you're getting a lot of tricep stimulation, but also getting a little bit more upper pec too, which can never hurt.
Yep.
I feel like you can never get too much upper chest. So, yeah. Let's see, what was that? And like for side delts, I've always stuck with dumbbell lateral raises for the most part. Although I have started doing like the single arm cable lateral raises, and I actually really like them now. Just because you're keeping that constant tension on the side delts.
Yeah, huge fan of those.
And I think there's some, like I do a certain stance, so like I have the cable in between my legs or whatever. Like
legs.
Jeff Nibbert had a video
Yeah.
where he did that, and I started doing them like that. But I really like those. So I guess you could say probably those. And then like for the rear delts, really honestly, I've been doing face pulls like just with the rope. But I would say really probably for me the best movement for rear delts is just like the reverse fly machine. Really, you're just keeping that constant tension, and like I've just gotten much better stimulation than trying to do like the rear delt flies where you're bent over. It's not as good of a stimulation to me because you're not keeping that tension there. So I think that's about every muscle group. And then calves, just
Fucking calves.
some kind of seated calf raise, and then like a standing variation. Nothing too special with them. Just with them, obviously, I think people just oftentimes go too heavy and they don't get that good stretch. With the calves, I think that's important to get that really good stretch. Good range of motion there. Leave the ego at the door with the calves.
Yeah. Do you do any direct ab work at all?
Oh, yeah. I need to address that because I get a lot of questions. And it's almost annoying because it's like the one muscle group I really don't train is the only muscle group people ask me about. But I don't really do much at all. Honestly, like I might do like one exercise, like hitting trying to focus more on the obliques. Like I'll kind of hit them some, like with some like knee raises and like where you're going to the side. So you're hitting the obliques, but other than that, like I don't really do much at all for abs.
Yeah.
Except I have been, kind of doing more planks and more core work.
Nice.
To actually focus on, just bracing properly. So that's been something I've really been working on because I realized that was a huge issue I had for so many years is I had no idea how to brace properly.
Okay.
And so that has, and of course, that kind of also goes into why I got a lifting belt for the first time. So I got that for Christmas, I got a nice Inzer Lover belt, but
Nice.
I just realized that that was a huge issue for me, and it was holding me back from squatting, deadlifting like I should, or as much as I should, or as much as I could. And so I've been trying to get used to using a lifting belt. I think it kind of helps me, just think more about bracing properly. But yeah, I've been doing some exercises for that too. Because I think sometimes people think like just training your abs and actually training your core is like the same thing, but it's a difference between having that intra-abdominal pressure using the doing that versus just hitting your rectus abdominals. Yep. So but yeah, I've been focusing on core training, not as much just direct ab work, but yeah, that's been carrying over to like my squats and my Romanian deadlifts and even my rows, barbell rows. It's just been, do more actual core training, and I think that was just holding me back, and I feel like ultimately that's holding me back from really putting on as much muscle as I could because, if I'm not able to squat as much, I'm not putting as much, tension on my quads, or if I'm not doing as much weight on the RDLs as I could, I'm not putting as much tension on the hamstring glutes and whatnot, so I think that was holding me back, and so yeah, that's something I've really been working on over the past year or so.
Cool. Right on, man. All right, man. Closing one for you, last one that we'll go through for this. kind of your 3 biggest like training tips for people like starting out. You know, guys that were younger. You know, maybe they got a little home gym like you did, or maybe they first got their gym membership. Like, what kind of big 3 things would you tell somebody?
Well, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I can just give 3, but I'll give a few at least. For one, I would say is obviously you have to be consistent. That's going to beat everything. First of all, don't overthink things. I think people get too caught up in the minutia of the small details, and they forget about the big picture.
Yeah.
So don't get overwhelmed by all these little details when you start out. You need to focus on just being consistent, consistently train, have a structured routine, focus on progression. Make sure you're focusing on progressing in each of your lifts. Make sure you're eating enough. I think that's another thing is guys are afraid to put on weight, or they just want to be lean. But it's like that's going to fuel your training. That's going to help you recover it too. Is you got to be in that. I think a surplus for the most part. If you really want to put on muscle, you need to stay in a surplus. So I think most of the majority of your training, you should be in a surplus. You should be focusing on progressing in each of your lifts. You just have a consistent routine. Stick to it, and you'll see a ton of progress just with that. And always, just try to learn more. I think be open minded. And focus, just pick movements that are going to allow you to get a great connection with those muscle groups you're trying to train too. So with your exercise selection, pick movements that you can really feel the muscle working when you hit them. So I would say those are some decent tips. But yeah, definitely if you're first starting out, like if you're younger, you should be spending most of that time in a surplus, just trying to put on weight, trying to put on muscle, I think at least.
Yeah.
For me, before I spent the first 5 years of my training in a surplus. Obviously, I was quite young, so I was still growing at the time. I started at around 13 and a half, but even from that young age, I was just trying to eat. I was just trying to put on muscle, and I didn't overthink things. I think that's an issue. Like I said, I wasn't worried about this supplement or that supplement. Honestly, like if I had whey protein, I would get it some, but you know what I mean? Like, I just wasn't overthinking things. I was just training, trying to learn more, watching people on YouTube and stuff. I was trying to just get better, and I didn't really have much of an ego either. Like, when I was training, I was trying to make sure I was actually using good form and just trying to improve and progress in each of my lifts. Even when I first started, when I was young, I was writing down, my numbers and my reps and stuff. And so I think just tracking your progress, making sure you're getting stronger over time, making sure that you're in a surplus. If your performance isn't improving, you're probably putting on muscle, and just again picking exercises that are going to work well for you. And so, if you don't stress so much about those small details and just get those basic fundamental things down and spend years doing that, that's another thing is you got to be patient.
Yeah.
We've been training for a long time. I've been training for, I say a long time. Some people it's not even that long, but 7 years, and I still feel like I'm not anywhere close to where I can be.
Yeah.
And so it's like it takes a long time, and you continue to learn more along the way. I'm realizing there's a lot of things. Like even just a year or two ago, I didn't know that I know now, and I realized, like, dude, I could be bigger than I am right now if I had known that back then. And again, don't limit yourself. Don't limit what you can do. Don't focus so much about what this person says is possible or not. These people technically, they talk about, like, I don't have any evidence you're natural. Well, you don't have any evidence, like, this is possible or this isn't possible. Like, It's just based on your opinion, really.
Exactly.
So just focus on getting better. And, like, again, like if I had had that mindset, man, I would have never gotten to where I am right now. Like, you might not have the best genetics, or you might, and if you hold back, you won't ever see how crazy you could look.
Exactly.
But either way, it's like you're just gonna hold yourself back if you get caught up in what these other people say. So have an open mind. Just focus on getting better than you were yesterday, and don't overthink the small details. Don't overthink it, man. Just continue to, just hit those basics. if you hit them over time, you'll see a ton of progress, and then over time, you can incorporate and kind of think more about those small details. I think over time, once you build that base, once you put on more muscle and whatnot, you can kind of focus more on the smaller details. But initially, just get those basic fundamentals down. Don't be the guy who he sees the big guys, like, what supplements do you take? Don't be that guy. But yeah, just stay in your lane. Try to just physique,
Yeah.
That's about all I got.
No, that's like, I agree with all of that stuff, especially like the point where you said, like, don't overthink it and stick to the fundamentals. Like with how much information there is out there, like even what you would have had access to when you started would have been even more than what I had access to, right? Like the amount of information there is out there now for people through social media, through websites, YouTube, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, like it can be overwhelming, right? There's, everybody's saying that this is the best exercise, this is the best nutrition plan, and you got people contradicting each other, and all this stuff, and it's just like find what you enjoy to do, find stuff you like to do that you're going to be able to stick to, and just like you said, be consistent and run with that for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and then you can see really what's possible, right?
Definitely, and and that's the thing. Like, I'm just a kid, really. Still, obviously, I'm not some pro bodybuilder or anything, not yet, at least. So, I've just, and basically by me saying that is, I'm just trying to let people know is that I'm not perfect or anything, or my training hasn't been perfect. There's still a lot of improvements I need to make. But one thing I've done is I've been consistent.
Yeah.
I've stuck with it, man. I've just been consistent, and there's a lot you can achieve if you just stay consistent. And like that's just such a huge part of it. You have to stay consistent, and over time, you can, you learn more things, and you apply those things, and you continue to get better. But a lot of people just they don't see the results they want like over a few months, and they kind of give up. But you gotta instill those habits. Once you form that routine, you form that structured routine each week. Where you go into the gym these certain days. You have a certain training plan you're doing. That's the biggest thing. Is don't focus so much on like what's the best split, this or that. Just doing something and doing something you kind of enjoy, doing exercises you like, doing a split you like, whether that's a split or whatever. And, over time, like, if you feel like you need to make adjustments, you can make adjustments. But, first of all, you just got to start out with something. You're not just going to let you spend trying to find what's most optimal. Could just be spent, like, actually doing it. Yeah. Actually doing something, So just go into it, and then, you're going to learn more. But ultimately, with bodybuilding, like the best guys are the guys who do, when they say why they're doing certain things, it's always usually because, like, it's what's worked best for them. So they know themselves that you got to learn yourself, and so that's important. It just takes time. You're not just gonna automatically know what's the best exercise, you should do for your chest, or whatever. You got to just experiment. And I think that's what some of the best natural bodybuilders in general have done. Like with Jeff Alberts, my coach, he's done a lot of experimentation, and like the way he trains and everything is, based upon, his experience and what is working best for him. So you have to personalize your training, your nutrition, everything around yourself and around what, going to be best for you. And so just don't be caught on what other people are doing. And you'll just learn more along the way. But yeah, we're also trying to learn, also trying to get better. And again, that you just gotta have, I think, the right mindset. Just going into it, like I feel like with bodybuilding, sometimes there's aspects of bodybuilding that I really dislike. Yeah. Like especially obviously, with guys that just they focus so much on the drugs, and like that's all they care about is like what you're taking, man, or like they follow these guys on YouTube that like who don't even really know, like they're not real credible pros pros or anything. They just say the pros are taking this, and like they're taking way more than like the top Olympians are.
Yeah.
And like they don't even look good. So like people get caught up and they start following people like that, and they start. It's just like a mind thing because like you're focused on like just the shortcuts. You're focused on I just want to you just want to get the reward, but you don't care about the process.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge issue. Is you got to be focused on. You got to love it. Like the best bodybuilders are the people who like they enjoy this, man. Brandon Warren, he trains crazy, but that's how he loves to train. Like he loves working hard. Like you have to they love the process. You have to love the process. I think people get too caught up in like just the end result, and those people that don't ever stick with it, or they don't ever go as far as they could. And so you got to your mindset has to shift. So at some point in your training career to really being focused on just enjoying the process, doing because you enjoy it. I know most of us are motivated by external reasons at first, like with just getting a good physique, getting lean, or having some muscle. But over time, like for me now, it's like I just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy training. I don't compete. Like I didn't compete, or I didn't train. I competed because I love training. It's because I just love the training aspect. I love the process of it. So you have to have that mindset. Don't go into it focused on just the end result about like the drugs or just about being lean. Like you got to enjoy every aspect of it, really.
Yeah. No.
If you want to go far, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. And what an appropriate way to end this. That was 100%. That's what it is, right? That's the game. You gotta love it. You gotta enjoy the process and be in it because you love it, right? So no, that's cool, man. Thanks for finishing it off strong for all the young bucks out there trying to get huge.
Yeah.
Quickly, man.
I mean, like that's how I was for so many years. So I'm speaking from experience,
Yep, 100%. Where can people find you? Plug the Instagram and stuff, and we'll have that link down below the video. Where can people hunt you down?
So I have a YouTube channel, but I'm not active on there. So I don't know if you want to go to that. But if you look at my name, just Joshua Kenyon, you can find my YouTube channel. I have a few videos, but they're older videos. But you can see like when I was 16, I have a video of me on there. If you're curious, or I have an older transformation video when I was like 18, and you can see here's a few clips when I was like 13, 14.
Cool.
And then, up till I was 18. So I don't know if a lot of people have actually seen some of those old videos of me. But, yeah, if you go to my channel, you can kind of see some of those older clips. And I mean, I really should upload a newer video. I think the most recent one was some months back. I think I posted some kind of physique update or something. But again, it's like, I don't have someone to film me. And I also don't really like the idea of having to like just set up my camera to film myself, like while I'm training, like trying to always set it up, and it's kind of like annoying to me. Like usually if I'm posting stuff in my story, I'm lifting with someone else usually then, or like maybe it's my squats or something. But like just setting up my phone or camera to like film every set or a set from each exercise to me is kind of just would take away from my workout. I feel like that's kind of why I don't do it, but. If I had obviously someone to film me, that would be super cool. But yeah, that's kind of why I don't really post too much on there. But you can go to that, and then of course just my Instagram is. If you look up Joshua Kenyon, you can probably find my profile, or Kenyon the Third. Yeah, just so people know, my first name was actually Joshua. I know people call me like Kenny or something, like
Kenny.
or Kenyon, and they think it's my first name, like. Kenyon is my last name. I'm the third. I have four brothers, or there's me. I have three brothers. There's four of us, so I'm the third one. So I just made up that name, Kenyon the Third. Cool. I'm the third Kenyon son in my family. So the man
is a bodybuilder and also a poet. So that's something you can add to your profile. All right, man. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on for round 3. Look forward to seeing what the future holds for you, and this definitely won't be the last time on the podcast.
Oh yeah, and I appreciate it again. Like it's humbling for me to even be asked to be on any podcast like this, because again, it's like at this point, I'm not really a figure in natural bodybuilding. I've only done one show, really.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not some seasoned veteran or anything, but like it's really humbling to have that, you know, time to be able to just kind of talk to people and have them listen to me. And again, all you guys that do follow me, like on Instagram and stuff, you know, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. Like, still, even now, like, just thinking that there's even that many people that like will follow me and that are curious about, or like the people that send in the questions, to think there's actually that many people that even are curious about what I'm doing or how I train or anything in my life is like really crazy to me. So it definitely does not go unnoticed, and I certainly appreciate it. And so hopefully I can kind of continue to inspire some people and have a positive impact in the natural bodybuilding community.
Cool. All right, man. Well, again, thank you. I appreciate it again, and you have a good night, dude.
Oh yeah, you too.
Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.